Welcome to the Simply Sales Podcast. This is where we share and discuss our experiences in the world of sales and business. Each week, we will provide you with actionable content to help you improve your sales game. Thank you for taking the time to listen. We hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to episode 007 of the Simply Sales Podcast. On today's episode, I have with you a few tips for interviewing for either your first sales role or interviewing for your next sales role. So a little bit of a rant from me. On average, per week, I probably interview between 10 to 20 people per week on a face-to-face basis. As part of our recruitment business, we conduct the pre-interviews on behalf of the client. So that means we averagely interview, or I personally interview, like I said, between 10 and 20 people per week. Now, the biggest grudge that I have is where you speak to someone on the phone a couple of times and they agree they're coming along to the interview. They book in, they confirm the time, you send them a confirmation email, they reply to the email telling you, yes, 100% they are coming. You then send them a text the day before. They reply to the text and confirm 100% they are coming. And even on the morning of the interview, you send them another text, just a reminder, here's the interview address, here's the time. I look forward to seeing you. I'm personally travelling to come and meet you. And guess what? They still don't turn up. There's nothing more frustrating than that happening, because not only is that person wasted an available time slot for somebody else, but they've wasted my time and their own time, and I just don't get it. So if you say you're going to turn up, then do it. Obviously, if there's an emergency or whatever, then it takes 2 seconds to send a text just to say, look, I'm really sorry, I can't make it. I'll call you later. I don't need the full details. I just need to know if you're coming or not. If you are given an opportunity for an interview, the biggest thing that I can say to you is make sure you turn up, because it doesn't look good. Okay, so rant over. Apologies. So interview tips. So number one, my personal preference is for you to turn up 30 minutes before I have a meeting or an appointment. Even if it's to a dealership I've already been to before, I will always turn up at least half an hour beforehand. The reason why is because if I get held up in traffic, hopefully it's not longer than half an hour, but if I get held up in traffic, it's not too much of a problem. I don't need to stress, I don't need to worry. If I've never been there before, I can find out where the location is, I can find out where the nearest Costa is, or I can find out where the nearest coffee shop is to grab a coffee. And also, if there's nowhere to park near there and you've got to find parking on the road or in a local car park, again, you've got time to scout the area, find where to park. So my advice is to turn up 30 minutes beforehand so you know where you're going. But I would turn up at least 10 minutes early to the interview. So if you've got an 11 o'clock interview, I would turn up at 10 to 11. Purely and simply, it makes a good impression because you've turned up not on time, but you've turned up before the time. Yeah, because if you get the job and your job is you start work at 8:30, that doesn't mean you turn up at 8:30. That means you start work at 8:30, which means you need to be there at least 10, 15 minutes beforehand to prepare to start work at 8:30. So that also gives you that first impression as an interviewer, an employer, and someone that's going to have an employee working for them. It provides the right impression to the company. So that's tip number one. So arrive 10 minutes early for your interview. Tip number two. So first impressions count. The biggest thing that I kind of see is where people turn up and they don't wear a suit, or and I know that everyone doesn't have a suit, but I think if you're going for a sales role, or indeed any job, you should dress for the job that you're going for. So if you're coming along for an interview for to work in some form of sales, whether it's face to face or telephone, you need to be presentable. You need to turn up in a suit. You need to wear a shirt. You need to wear a tie, because at the end of the day, the first impressions do count. And there's nothing worse than someone turning up without a suit jacket, or without a tie, or the top button of their shirt undone, because it just doesn't give the right impression. I'm not overly old school with regards to facial hair. Obviously, clean shaven always looks the best. Design a stubble or a groomed beard, is equally fine. But what's not fine is where it looks like you've just rolled out of bed and you've got 2 days worth of stubble on your face, because it's not enough to make it look like you've tried to, style it. And there's too much to make it look like you've just shaven. So again, that, goes down to first impressions. They do count. So dress for the job that you want. So if you want to work in, a high sales role, where you're dealing with high net worth individuals, then you need to be wearing, the best suit. You can't just pop to Matalan and pick up a £40 suit. If it's your first sales role, then by all means, you need to go down that route. Then that's not a problem, because at the end of the day, you've made the effort and you look presentable, and that's the most important thing. So dress for the job that you want. Tip number 3: make sure you are congruent with your CV. The amount of people that I'm looking at their CV and I ask them a question about, their previous role, or when did you leave there, and it doesn't match up with their CV. You need to know when you left that company or the reason why. Because at the end of the day, if I'm asking you a question and you've lied on your CV just to get to a face-to-face interview, then it's not going to go down well. So make sure that you know your CV inside out, make sure it's truthful, make sure it's honest. And if you've been somewhere for 6 months, then there's no point hiding it, because at the end of the day, if the company does references, they can find out that information. So make sure that you understand your CV, you know what CV it is. You've only got one copy of a CV, you've not got several different copies of CVs all over the place over several, different job portals. Make sure that you are congruent with your CV. Tip number 4: so if you're already in some form of sales role, regardless of what it is, make sure you know your stats. Because if you're already selling products, then the person that's going to be interviewing you, or the company, they're going to want to know what your stats are. So, whatever your company, whatever their KPIs are, you need to know that. So if it's your conversion rate, your close rate, how many people do you speak to sell X number of products, you need to know that. Because at the end of the day, that's going to give a better picture for the person that's interviewing to go, right, okay, well, not only did the guy turn up 10 minutes early, not only does he look the part and he's dressed for the part, he knows his CV inside out and also knows his figures, because that then means that you take pride in your work. I don't believe that anyone that's in sales doesn't know how many customers they need to speak to sell a product. I just don't believe it. And if you don't know, then why don't you know? If the company don't provide the information for you, then do it yourself. All you need to do is create an Excel spreadsheet and just keep track of it. You don't need to keep customers' data. You can literally type in, every time you make a call, just put a 1 in the box and then add up them calls until you get a sale, and then just keep repeating that process. So right, okay, you make 10 calls, you make 1 sale, and then you can just keep tracking it. So know your stats. That's tip number 4. Tip number 5: remember to smile, act natural, and enjoy the process. I know interviewing can be quite a stressful time, because if you really want the job, or you just feel under pressure because it's an interview and so on. The biggest thing I can say is relax, take a big deep breath, remember to smile, act normal, act natural, be yourself, and enjoy the process. And if you aren't successful, then review what happened and adjust yourself for the next interview, because actually maybe you wasn't right for that particular role that you'd applied for, but that doesn't mean that you're not right for another role. So, there's no losing, there's always winning or learning. And if you've learned something from this episode, then go back through the 5 tips. If you've never sold before and you want to enhance your chances of getting a sales job, then go back to episode number 1, listen to Selling Basics, understand some form of a sales process, because that's going to help you. If even if you're applying for a trainee role and they're going to give you all of the training, if you have a basic understanding of a sales process, it just enhances your chances of standing out compared to the other 5 or 10 people that may have applied for that same role. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher. If you'd like to connect with us, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Simply Sales Podcast. Alternatively, you can head over to the website simplysalespodcast.com.